is critical. You say don't be cynical. The cliff below this pinnacle. Inside this moment we will need a miracle. Delay, delay, delay. Delay, delay, delay. Our debating, accelerating, and complicating, pollinating. Delay, delay, delay. My song tastes like a flower with nectar, sweetened by conscious power. Melodies, this just might be the hour for building and toppling of the tower. But we delay, 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 delay.
Greetings and welcome to the Motherless Child Podcast. I'm your host, Deanya Divine. Today I want to talk about the day that changed our lives forever. Just to give you a brief background about me, I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, and I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, March of 2020. Me and my mom decided that we wanted to start over, so we packed up our things and moved here to Charlotte. Now, before we moved here, we actually were co-founders of a private school called Prestige Academy Schools of Arts and Business. And we no longer had the financial backing to continue, so we decided to close our doors and start anew in another state. Hopefully, the goal was to move to Charlotte and reopen once we kind of got a hang of things.
I was on the fence about it. Charlotte wasn't a place that was really on my radar. But outside of that, it was more so, having the mindset and the tenacity to say, hey, I'm going to move to a whole new state, a state in which I only know my family, no friends, no nothing. So I packed up everything and I moved here. And things were going okay for a while. As you guys know, 2020 is when the pandemic hit most of everyone pretty hard. And so we all had to try to struggle to maneuver during that time to try to figure out how we can kind of, keep our head above water. So it was definitely a challenge, but, I'm not one to run away from challenges. I'm not one to shy away from issues. And so, hey, let's start anew. So moving here, it was definitely a learning curve. So anyone knows if you're from Florida, if you've been to Florida, we let it hang out. Like, we don't have a lot of rules and regulations that most states have. That's what they say. The craziest people come from New York and all of Florida. Is what Charlemagne would say. And so moving here was definitely a learning curve of, doing things differently. And so we moved here, and I think my mom met some friends and start dating a guy. We didn't really know too much about him. She didn't bring him around too much, but we did know that it was someone that she, was connected to. And so we have struggled in our family with different issues. Most families have their issues that they struggle with. And so, of course, we are no different than anyone else. So we did have some of those same issues as well. But we were trying to give our mother grace. We were trying to give her an opportunity to be herself and to live her life. She's a grown woman, right? And she has every right to hang out with whoever she decided she wanted to hang out with. We didn't really interfere too much with that, but it was something to show to be a problem later on down the line. And so, as we progress in our new state, um, the goal was to reopen a school eventually once we've learned the system, and how things really operate here. We were going to try ourselves out with trying, to open up another school. And so, um, we were working diligently to do whatever we needed to do to get to that stage. Um, I remember having a conversation with my mom about, being less, um, open to meeting a lot of, new people, because you don't know people, right? You don't know who people really are. You only know who they be, and in most cases it could be a facade. It's not who they really are. And so, it was something that I really wanted her to work on, being so open. My mom has always been one of those women that is just super caring, super loving, super accepting of people. Me, not so much. Just because I've been burnt before and I've gone through things with people before, that my trust is not as open as hers was. Um, but I digress from that. So, she had friends that she would hang out with, and she was actually living between me and my sisters, spending a little bit of time with me, time with my sisters. Um, and so we kind of shared in the responsibility of looking after her and her looking after us. We all have children now, and so to have your mother around to assist in rearing your children is really a blessing, and that's how we looked at it. And so I remember the last night that I spoke to her, which was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was July the 24th. It was the night my nephew was born, and we were all at the hospital. It's my sister's firstborn. So, of course, it was one of those things where you kind of want to make sure that you're there and you're being supportive. And so we were all at the hospital, and we were looking forward to her coming to meet us at the hospital as well. However, she had some issues with getting there. And I remember telling her, like, Mom, this is extremely important. You have to be here. And she's like, I'll meet you there tomorrow. The next day came. No one had heard from her. Her phone was going straight to voicemail, which has happened before. So we weren't too alarmed, with that. But again, this was an important event that we definitely wanted her to be with us. And so we called. I think a few days passed from there. No one had really heard from her. But again, we didn't take it too much as an issue. My mom has, in her lifetime, tends to kind of go no contact whenever she feels like it, and we never take it personal. She always comes back. And so this particular time, days had gone by. We hadn't heard from her, and we're thinking, okay, maybe she's with some friends. She'll pop up, when she's ready. And I remember I started a new job. I was working with, an insurance company. I'm a licensed agent, so I took on a new role with the new insurance company. And I remember being on a call, and I got a phone call from a Charlotte number. I don't really know too many people here in Charlotte, so if you're not a bill collector, my son's school or something like that, I don't really recognize the number. And so the guy asked me, who I was and how I was related to my mom. And I told him that was my mom, and what can I help you with? He introduced himself as an officer for Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department. And so automatically I was like, well, maybe she got herself into something. Maybe she was in jail or something like that, not thinking the worst of the worst, right? And, he asked me if I was sitting down, and I'm like, no, yes, no, where I'm sitting down because I'm working, but, why, in my mind, like, why are you asking me this? Like, why is that important? And he, because asking a little bit, at when's the last time I've heard from my mom, and do I know who she was with, and just, different things. And I informed her that she was, the last time I spoke with her, she was with a friend of hers. I didn't really know the friend's real name, because a lot of times when she referred to her friends, they were, she would let us know their nickname or their aliases. So we didn't really know who these people were, just, based off of her introduction. But he asked me, do I remember who she was with? And I said, I told him the person's name and the last time that I'd spoken to her. And I just remember him asking me if I was sitting down. And at that point, I still wasn't looking at it as something bad had happened. I thought maybe she had, maybe they were looking for her or something like that. And so he said that we have found your mom, and I forget what part of the city it was in, but we found her deceased. And I think at that very moment, I felt my entire soul leave my body. I've never experienced death on this level. I've had my grandmother pass, but she was sick, so we had time to prepare for that. My dad's mother passed. She was also sick, so we had time to prepare for that and say our goodbyes. But this particular time was a I can't even describe it. It was just an enormous feeling of grief that just took me over. And I remember logging off the phones, and I asked him, like, what happened to her? Do you know what happened? And he says, we're still looking into it. We don't, that's why I was asking you all those questions, because we don't really know exactly what happened or who she was with. It's still an investigation being open, but as we get more information, we'll definitely share it with you. And I just remember sobbing uncontrollably. He asked me if I would be okay being alone. And all I could think about was, wow, my sister just had her firstborn baby. My sister, my other younger sister, is pregnant now with twins. How am I going to share this information with them? How am I going to be the one to tell everyone this heartbreaking news? All right. As the oldest child, I've always had the responsibility of taking on, things that my other siblings didn't have to worry about. And so automatically was like, well, this is just another part of the duty of being the oldest child. And so after I hung up the phone, I just remember I couldn't really get myself together. I was so hurt. I was so devastated. I was so just a mess, because honestly, I didn't really feel like that should have been a conversation that should have been had over the phone anyway. However, it had to be said, right? And so try my very best to kind of gather myself before I had to do all the phone calls. And I just remember just honestly blacking out. I think I blacked out for a while, completely just shocked, and just I can't even really think of the words to describe the feeling that I had. But all I can really say is that it was more of just a devastation, right? And I remember the first person that I called once I was able to kind of get my thoughts in line. Well, first, originally, I thought that maybe they just didn't know. Maybe they thought it was her, but they weren't really sure. And he told me that they did have fingerprints, and that's how they were able to determine who she was. And I was just like, well, hopefully I don't have to identify the body, because that's not something that I'm able to mentally, physically, or emotionally do. And it was still one of those things like, how someone do this to my mother, to my best friend, my confidant? What would have caused this to happen? And what in the world would make someone even consider doing this to a 60-year-old woman, right? Like I said, my mom was very short. She was, I used to say that she was 4'11", probably 125, 30 pounds, if that. I mean, she was a small, sweet woman, and I just couldn't imagine someone hurting her in the way that the detective described. And so when I called my Aunt Gail. She was my first person that I reached out to. She's like the next person in line after my mom as like my best friend, like someone that I just really love and honor. And so I called her, and she was driving. I remember the conversation. She was driving, and I was strong enough to like keep my composure, because what I didn't want to do is put anyone in the situation where their life is at risk for the information that I'm relating to them. And so I remember she was like, I'm driving. And I was like, well, give me a call when you get home, so that way we can talk and just have something that really important I need to tell you. And she was like, well, what is it? I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell you while you're driving. So get someplace safe and then, call me back. So after that, I picked up the phone and I called my sister, the one that's pregnant with twins, and asked her what she was doing. And she was also driving. And I said, okay, well, when you get someplace safe, give me a call. Because again, I didn't want to give them that information while they're on the highways and byways. It just didn't make any sense to me. So they both ended up calling back at the same time, and we all got on the phone together. It was both my sisters, my Aunt Gail, and my Aunt Brenda was on the line with us as well. And I had to be the one to break it. And I said, she's gone. And they're like, who's gone? What's happening? And I told them, I was like, they found mom deceased. And I just could hear the heartbreak over the phone. It was one thing experiencing my own heartbreak and digesting this on my own. It was a whole nother feeling to see or to hear the hurt and the heartbreak in my family. And so I remember us just all on the phone. We're just sobbing. And I mean, it seemed like we were sobbing for hours. We just didn't know what to say. And I knew I had to call my dad. I knew another person. My parents have been divorced for over 20 years, but I knew that they really loved each other. They were still friends. And so I knew the next person I would have to get myself composure together for would be my father. So my aunt was like, I'm on the way. I'll be on the road. She was actually in Florida, in Tampa at the time. And so she got on the road that night and was here the next day. I remember my younger sister being kind of in shock. I don't even know to this day if she's had an opportunity to grieve. Being a new mom, having a C-section, all of these things happen within weeks of each other. And so I think for her it was, trying to stay mentally stable for her newborn son, which I can totally understand. My son is 7. He takes care of himself. So that wasn't really something that I was too focused on outside of like his everyday. Called was my father. And of course he was at work, and it wasn't one of those things that I could hide from him, because after I had got off the phone with my family, sobbing with them, I just couldn't hold it anymore. And so I told him, and he was just like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. This can't be real. And I said, I know, and it's very real. This is what happened. And I just remember a player, 6 foot, probably 5, 300 pounds. I'm not sure how big he is, but he's a really big guy. And to hear him sobbing broke my heart as well. It was just devastating, And to this day, now that granted that was last year, and we're coming up on a year. In August it'll be a year. And I still don't think that I have fully accepted it. I think part of me understands and knows that she's no longer with us, but the other part is just not allowing it to sink in. I'm just not really, really accepting it. And I think the same thing goes for my sisters and her siblings. I think we're trying our to continue life as normal as possible, but there is no normal to that, right? There's no normal to someone violently taking your mother out. And more about that, right? It's almost insane to even be saying this to you all, but it is a reality of mine. And I replay that phone call in my head every single day. Every single day I replay that phone call and constantly thinking about what I could have done differently, how I could have handled her differently. What could I have done? Could I have made her stay home and not go out with her friends? Could I have, pretty much left her with my son more often so that she had no other choice but to be there for him? What could I have done differently to get a different outcome? And I replay that in my mind every single day. And I know that it wasn't anything that I could have done. And a lot of people say, well, everything happens for a reason and God won't put more on you than you can bear. And, for the longest time, I would say for the first probably 3 to 4 months after this situation happened, it was hard for me to fathom that God could do something like this to someone who loved him so much. My mom moved to Charlotte, and so she loved the Lord. It was, bringing souls to the Lord and inspiring them to live a holiness lifestyle was her mission, And so to know that a woman who gave her life to God in the manner in which she did, and this happened to her, there can't be a God. There cannot be someone that will allow something like this to happen. That was my perception. And I know a lot of people go through this. They lose children, they lose family members to gun violence, and you just cannot make sense out of it. It's nothing that you can say or do to really make sense out of it. It's something that you'll be dealing with for the rest of your life. And so now that I have this heaviness on my shoulder, now that my soul is practically gone, right? My essence had been sucked away from me with one phone call. Now I have to get myself together to plan her services. As a 39-year-old woman who has never had to do any of this before, it was almost to the point of a mental breakdown for me, because where do we start? First of all, I just talked to her not too long ago, and now all of a sudden I'm planning her services. Like, how did this happen? And so we had to get together and come up with where she was going to be and what we were going to do and who we were going to invite. And I mean, if you've ever planned a funeral before, you know that it's a lot that goes into it, because you have to have your programs. You got to find where you're going to be, where it's going to be the repast, who's going to speak at the services, what's the lineup of the services. And honestly, none of us was in that mental state to where we could even organize anything. Like, we were all so devastated. To think about the logistics of how we were going to celebrate her life was just unfathomable. I couldn't even piece it together. And so We came across a funeral home that wasn't too far from where I lived, and we booked the facility, and started the whole planning process. My family was amazing with helping out with the programs and the obituaries and things like that. And one thing that we didn't want to happen is for the news media to be out at the funeral while we're trying to grieve. We didn't want that. And because it was a homicide, I had been talking to the news. They called me numerous times. I mean, it was every news channel you can think about called me. And this was like a day or two after this happened, or a day or two after we found out. And I just remember, like, I can't go on the news. Like, I want to talk about my mom. I want to share her memory, but I physically, mentally cannot go on the news and do this right now. And so a lot of the news channels, I mean, one popped up at my house. I mean, it was crazy. It was so crazy. And so I remember talking to one guy. His name was Glenn. I remember he was really, really sweet. And he was really kind, and he called me. He's like, I want to, offer my condolences to you and your family. I just wanted to know if you wanted to say a little bit of something about your mom, and so that we can create a narrative that's not pieced together by what people, may have, by people in the streets, and, or people who didn't really know her. And so I did take the time, and I talked about her and how our relationship was. And I tried my best not to sob through that interview, because it was so hard. I hadn't really, I said it to my family, and I remember talking to my dad and call my best friend. But as far as like actually talking to someone outside of my family, that wasn't something that I did. That wasn't something that I was prepared for. And so it took a lot out of me to even be that vulnerable, to share my thoughts. And I remember him, giving me some resources of people that could, had experienced that type of loss, and some resources that could possibly help me along the way. But I remember at the funeral, I think we all were still in a state of shock. And so we grieved, but it was really just like, we gotta show up for her. Like, yes, we want to break down, and we're barely really even getting dressed to even show up at the funeral, but we can't break down because we have so much to do for her. We have to make sure her legacy doesn't die. And I remember the funeral director telling me that because of the state of her body, we wasn't going to be able to have an open casket. And so again, I felt robbed. Someone took my mother away from me, and I can't even say goodbye to her. Like, I can't even look at her and kiss her and say goodbye. They took that away from me. And I just remember being so angry. I was so angry. I've never, ever experienced this type of anger in my entire 39 years of living. I was furious. Everything and everyone and every place that we went here reminded me of her, and it just caused more anger. I remember when I returned back to work, and some of my clients, their children would call and handle business for them. And I remember just getting angry instantly. They can say, oh, I'm calling for my mom. And I would say, and I would just feel this sense of anger just take over me. And it was really bad. It was a real bad, I guess you can say, period in my grief process, where I was just completely angry. And I was closed on to talk to people. I didn't want to fellowship. I didn't even really want to talk about it. And I remember telling the funeral, I can't bury her. I'm not ready to release her. So we cremated her because I wanted her to be with me. And I remember, everyone agreeing to that, and agreeing that I would keep her ashes Because yes, my mom was my mom, but we were almost like sisters in a way because we were really, really close. And I just wasn't ready to release her. I wasn't ready to put her in the ground. To me, that was a visualization of where she was going to always be. And I just couldn't take that. And so we ended up cremating her. And the services were beautiful. We, nice, quick service. Again, that was something financially that we had to come up with as well. Just imagine trying to keep up with your own everyday life, and now you're responsible for your mother's funeral expenses, and you're not even prepared for that. As a health insurance agent, I will say that my fault was to not get life insurance. I would highly, strongly suggest anyone that's listening, there's life insurance. There's life insurance on yourself. You have life insurance on your children, life insurance on your parents, because you never know. You never know. You don't know the date or the time that you're going to be called home, and to put a financial strain on your family is probably the last thing that you really want to do. And so that's one of my regrets is not having life insurance. So after the funeral, I think I started to spiral out of control a little bit. I was drinking constantly. I mean, I would wake up drinking. I would go to bed drinking. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't function without having a glass of wine. And it was more just a glass of wine. I was going through bottles of wine a day. I mean, entire bottles of wine. And I felt like I was neglecting my son. I would feed him, but he pretty much is self-sufficient. I've trained him to be that way. And so he would, shower and go to bed whenever. And I just couldn't be present for him. I could not be present for him. It was a void in my life. And I just couldn't for a few months, I couldn't show up for him. And I remember going to my primary care doctor, and I told him, I said, I'm not doing well. I'm not making it. I need help. And the only thing that I was worried about was them taking my son away from me. Like I said, my son is autistic, nonverbal, and he doesn't do well with change. And I just was like, there is no one that can take him. My sister just had her new baby. My other sister is about to give birth to twins. I can't put that responsibility on them, but I'm barely making it. Like, I am not making it. I'm not well. And we tried different medications. None of them seemed to work. And so I was right back to drinking, because that was the only thing that I felt that I could do to take the pain away for a moment. And during all of this, you probably asked, well, where's Ram's dad? Maybe he could have went to go to stay with his dad. His dad actually got sentenced to 13 years in prison a few months prior to this happening. Me and his father were together for about 13 years, and recently broke up when I moved here. So we were only separated for 4 years. In that time frame, we were co-parenting, so we've always shown up for our son. But in this particular case, he was in jail, in prison, and it was nothing he could do for us. It was nothing he could do for me. And for the first time, I would say ever, I felt completely alone. Completely alone. I didn't have a relationship with God because of this situation. I just completely denounced him. My sisters, they had their spouses, and so they did the best they could to show up for me. But as the oldest, I felt like it was my responsibility to be strong. So no one knew what I was experiencing on my end. No one knew that I was literally losing control. And as an Aquarius and a leader and a life path 7 and a generator, all these different things, I never want to lose control. I never want to lose control. And I literally lost control for a few months of my life. So I quit my job, and I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm barely making it. I was able to, my days literally consist of going to sleep, waking up, taking my son to the bus stop, getting back in the bed, picking him up from daycare, feeding him, getting him to bed, going back to bed. Like that was all that I could do. That was all of the spoons that I had available to get through the day. And I just remember, saying like, is this how my life, is this how it's going to be for the rest of my life? I really felt like this was going to be it for me, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm the most ambitious person you will ever meet. And so I had no concept of creating or doing anything. My mom was my world. She was, and I often joke and say that she was the love of my life. She was my soulmate. And I felt lost. I felt like I felt like I was against a brick wall and there was nothing that I could do to get off of it. There's nothing I can do to help myself because I am so torn. I am so heartbroken. I am spiraling out of control. Thank God that I didn't, get into the drug arena, but I was definitely becoming an alcoholic. I could see it. I could feel it. I could see the changes. I've gained over 15 pounds during that time because all I could do was eat and drink and sleep. And that's what my life looked like for a while. I would say this happened in August. So I would say September, October, November, December, January, February. I was a complete mess. My best friend, did the best that she could to show up for me, and my sisters were there, but I was a mess. I was literally spiraling out of control. And I remember telling my doctor that if I don't get the help that I need, I'm afraid. I'm actually afraid of what could happen to me and what could happen to my son. And I honestly don't know how I got out of that. Here we are in April, leading up into May, and I feel a little bit stronger. I feel a little bit, I won't ever say better, but I feel a little bit better than I was then. The drinking has cut down. I still have a glass of wine here or two, but it's not as bad as it was. And the reason for me starting this podcast was show that I can share my experiences with you, and also as hopefully we have the ability to heal together. My sister said, well, what about therapy? And I said, hey, therapy is great, but there's nothing that the therapist can tell me that I don't already know. One thing about me is I've been on a spiritual journey, a spiritual path for almost 10 years. And so I know a lot of this, but at this point, I just need to talk it out. I just need to share my thoughts. And as I look in the news recently, there's a lot of domestic violence situations that end in tragedy. And I've noticed that it's a lot of people coming unhinged, excuse me. A lot of people that are just completely batshit crazy. And so I realized, I said, I want to create a safe space. I want to create a safe space for women who've experienced this type of pain, lost a daughter, who's lost a son, who's lost a mother, and to tragedy, not causes, not illnesses, but just by the hands of another. That's a whole different thing to heal from, and so I wanted to be able to offer a safe space for women to share their stories as they seek out justice. Now, with my mom's murder, there has not been a suspect. They don't have any suspects. They don't know who is responsible for this. So in my grief and in getting through each day, I still have to fight for her. I still have to get justice for her. And that's a whole nother part that has to be taken out of me. I have to continuously talk about this in order to to get some answers. And so that's why I say this is going to be a life journey. This is going to be something that it's going to take me a lifetime to get through. And I'm not going to stop fighting until I find out who did this to her. I'm not. And so fast forward, this is where we are today, and the first episode of the Motherless Child podcast. I just wanted to give you guys a brief background of why I'm here and my reason for wanting to create this space. I hope that my story and my progress and me opening up to you all creates a space for you to do the same, because we can't do this alone. I've tried my best to do it alone, and I saw myself spiraling, and I would hate for someone else to go through that experience that I went through, to turn to alcohol or to turn to drugs or to turn to just unsafe behavior in order to cope, because that's usually the first way. That's the first thing that you know to do, is to just want to feel better, and by any means necessary. You know, if you're killing yourself in the process, you don't really care about that. You just want to feel better, right? You just want the pain to stop. And I still deal with that every day. One thing I have been doing is journaling. Like I said, I keep my mom in my home. I don't know, most people are not into ancestral offerings, but I do that for her. And I talk to her. And one thing that I will say is no one could ever keep my mom away from her kids. She may have, you know, did her thing for a couple of days and she would always come back home, but she was never away from us for too long. And I realized that her love is infinite. Like it's never going to end, whether she's here on this plane of existence or not. Wherever she is, what other plane or whatever dimension that she's on currently, she still is connected to us. And I say that because I remember going to the site where they found her body. And I just wanted to see it. I wanted to see first if the police, because if you're from Charlotte, you know that a lot of people here are not as smart as you would think. And so, you know, I'm not trying to take anything from the Charlotte Police Department. I'm sure they did the best they could. But I just felt like, I'm sure there is some evidence left out here. Like, I know, you know, my mom wasn't found with her cell phone. She wasn't found with her purse, her personal items, nothing. She was just found. And so I remember going to the site, and it was just an eerie feeling that stopped yelling and screaming. And I remember calling out for her, calling out to her. And I remember looking around, and I just saw a spot where I felt like that is probably where she was. And I just laid in that spot, and I cried and I sobbed, and I just said, Mom, I need to hear from you. I need to know that you're okay wherever you are. Let me know that you're okay. I and so I was out there for a while looking around, trying to see if I could find any type of evidence, maybe her cell phone or her purse or her identification, just something, because a part of me, although, they said that they had fingerprints, a part of me felt like maybe it wasn't her. Like maybe she faked her death, or maybe they thought it was her and they kind of got things, crossed, and it was really someone else and she's really still here with us. But, I just, part of me is just trying to, make sense of everything. And so I was just kind of creating all type of scenarios in my mind. And I remember going home, and that very same night, she came to me in my dream. And in my dream, we were riding in our old daycare van, and our old school van, and we were just having a blast. Like we were just laughing and talking, and I remember her telling me that she was okay and that she loves me and she'll be back soon. She was like, just, I want you to know I'm on vacation and I'll be back. And I remember waking up in complete tears. I was sobbing uncontrollably because I asked for her to come to me that very day, and that very night she did. So it let me realize that we're still connected, you know, no matter where she is, we're still connected. We're still one. And I think that was the first day that I started to heal a little bit. That was the first day that I actually felt that I was still alive, because I felt like I had died with my mom. I felt like my essence and my soul and my joy was robbed from me, and that I would never be the same woman again. And that very night when she visited me in my dream, it gave me some type of hope. It also let me know that energy is never destroyed, it's only transferred. And so you can't destroy an essence like hers. She's always going to be there. And other little things were happening as well. I remember taking my son to school, because this was a new school year. And mind you, my mom would handle a lot of his schooling and talking to the teachers and really, intertwining with them. And I remember meeting his new teacher, and I wasn't really impressed. I was like, oh my goodness, this guy seems like he does not know what he's doing. This is going to be another crazy school year, and I don't even have my mom to help me maneuver through this. And I left the school, and I remember going to get something to eat. I think I went to Chick-fil-A or something like that. And I was crying because I was like, Mom, this is so much on me. Like, I need your help. Like, I still need you. I'm only 39. Like, and that may seem old to some people, but that's young when it comes to your parents. Like, you're still your parents' child. And I'm like, I still really need you. And how could this happen? And how could you? And so part of sometimes the anger left from her to whoever did this to her. And I was actually angry with her for a while, because I'm like, who are you with? Like, who did you open yourself up to that had this type of character to do this to you? So that was also another thing that I kind of had to work through as well. But I remember going to the Chick-fil-A, and my mom loved iced coffee. I can't stand iced coffee. I was like, what's the point of drinking cold coffee? Like, I could never really get that part. But she loved iced coffee, and I would always go and get her iced coffee in the morning. And I got to Chick-fil-A, I ordered my order, and when I got to the window, mind you, I'm talking to her this whole ride. I'm just telling her about this new teacher, how this is going to be a disaster of a school year. I mean, I'm just talking. And I remember when I got to the rep, the employee asked me if I wanted a free iced coffee. She was like, would you like this iced coffee? It's free. And I was like, what? Normally if it's something that is going to be given to everybody, they'll tell you on the voice box when you're ordering, like, hey, we got free iced coffee today. Would you like one? So it could be prepared, but it was already prepared for me. And I don't know if the person in front of me didn't want the iced coffee or however it came about. All I knew was that was my mom talking to me, because I don't like iced coffee on the regular, right? And my mom loves it. And so for the lady to ask me if I wanted some iced coffee and it was free, all I could do was smile. I was like, thank you, Mom. And I know that you're still here with me. And so just having these different experiences with her after her death is the only thing that's got me through. I think my mom knows that I needed to hear from her. I needed to see her. I still needed, her. And I think that was her way of letting me know that she's still here with me. And she'll never leave me. Regardless if she's here in physical form, she's always going to be with me spiritually. And, just different situations like that has happened since her death. And that's what has really continue to push me and make me want to continue life, because I was contemplating suicide. I mean, it wasn't heavy on the brain, but it was definitely, I was just thinking of different ways. I remember me and my son went to a pool one night, and we were just in the pool, and I was like, well, what if I just go down to the deep end, I take his life jacket off, and we just both, just check ourselves out of here. And I ended up calling my cousin, and she, was the one that kind of, just talked me out of that. But it was thoughts like that continued to plague my mind. And I was worried. I was afraid that maybe one day I may go through with those thoughts. So getting help is definitely, it's a must when you go through this type of tragedy, because your life has changed. It's forever changed. And I knew that. And so that's the story of the day that changed our lives. That was August the 5th of last year. And we're coming up on a year of that. We're coming up on Mother's Day. We're coming up on different things that will remind us of her. And I just take each day as it comes. I don't plan too far in the future. I go with the moment. I try my best to live in the present, because I know that nobody's life is promised. We're all here on a time frame. And when our time is up, when our straw is drawn, the curtain will close. And so I try my best to continue life as she would want me to. It's not easy. And it's probably one of the hardest things, if you've ever experienced this, that you will ever experience. So each day I try my best to show up for myself. I try to show up for my son, and I try to get justice for my mom. But I do know that it's going to be a daily fight, and I do know that I'm not going to be better overnight. And so that's my story. That's why I'm here today with the Motherless Child podcast, because there are so many women whose lives have been taken and they are forced to leave their children behind. They are forced to move forward in another dimension. Their children are forced to move forward without their moms, without their parent. And then if they don't have justice, they don't have anyone to blame. They just have to sit with that anger. And to me, that is torture. It's complete torture. And so I want to be able to share the stories of women, of mothers who've lost their children, of children who've lost their mothers, in hopes that someone listening will know something and could bring us closer to finding justice for them. There's so many cases throughout the entire world that is almost sickening. And a lot of these women are minority women that people just don't care about. They just don't care. They don't put forth the energy or the effort to figure out what has happened to that woman. And I hope that can change one day. I hope that our voices could be heard and our stories could be shared in effort to find justice. And if I have to do it alone, I'm willing to do it alone. But I will find justice not only for my mom, but for any other child that has experienced this type of pain. Me and my sisters have founded a program called Diane's Daughters, and the purpose of that program is to provide grief support for children who've lost their parents suddenly, tragically, and try to be there to work through it, because to have to plan a funeral and to raise kids and to get through life, and you still don't feel like you're old enough to have to do that yet, it's a whole nother ball game. And I want to be able to to offer any type of assistance that I can to anyone who's experienced this type of trauma. So that's it for tonight's show. I just wanted to share with you the mission of this podcast and the reason why it's came about, and the story of the tragedy that completely changed our lives forever. I hope that you guys join me for the very next episode next Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Spreaker as well as Spotify. And I will try to share some clips on YouTube and on the rest of the social media handles as well. But if you have any suggestions, if you want to join the show, feel free to send me a message. I can be found on Facebook at Deonya Divine, Instagram, Deonya Divine, and on YouTube at Right to Reign. Also, you can shoot me an email at deonyadivine@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for tuning in tonight and allowing me to share my story with you. Like I said, if you're interested in joining the podcast or you would like to be a guest, feel free to send me an email. I would love to have you. The more voices we get, the more we get get these stories out, the better chance we have of getting justice. Remember, where there is no justice, there can never be peace.
My song tastes like a flower with nectar, sweetened by conscious power. Melodies, this just might be the hour for loving and toppling